Let's take a look at some common personal pronoun usage errors, which are some of the most widely tested sorts of sentence errors on those standardized tests like SAT and ACT, the writing sections. We're going to look at four different very common errors: the pronoun antecedent error, the pronoun reference error, the pronoun inconsistency error, and finally the pronoun case error. Let's look at each of these one by one. First of all, watch out for pronoun antecedent errors. Some developing writers actually get lost in tracing their pronouns back to the correct antecedent, and they then therefore use the wrong pronoun, as in this sentence. Each of the construction workers sat to drink their coffee. This may sound okay unless you know the rule. The pronoun there doesn't actually agree in number with its antecedent. Yeah, each is the antecedent, and each is singular, while there is plural. The mistake here comes typically from thinking the pronoun refers to workers, but workers is part of that prepositional phrase of the construction workers, and that whole phrase is actually going back to modify each. Okay? So in this sentence, we need a singular pronoun. There is plural. We need a singular pronoun. We're speaking in the third person possessive, so we know from our chart that we need to use his, her, or its. And it's just most likely that these are men being construction workers, so his is probably most correct. Each of the construction workers sat to drink his coffee. Be very careful when identifying your antecedents as you write. In case you ever run across something that's kind of tricky like this, always ignore those prepositional modifying phrases. Next up, don't misuse pronouns for unknown gender. This is another type of pronoun antecedent error. Pronoun antecedent errors are really, really common in cases where the gender of an antecedent is unknown to the writer, such as here. Every AP Lang student is expected to create journals with their reading. Again, sounds okay to most ears, but it's actually another pronoun antecedent error. The pronoun there does not agree in number with its antecedent, which is student. Student is singular. There is actually plural. We need a singular pronoun. So when the gender is unknown, like in our noun student, it could be a male or female student. When the gender is unknown, our pronoun needs to be kind of a compound pronoun. We got to use he or she, him or her, his or her, his or hers. You can also shorten this with just slashes: he slash she, him slash her, his slash her, his slash hers. These two usage, either using the or the slash, are the only widely accepted usages as far as style books go. So this sentence should read, every AP Lang student is expected to create journals with his or her reading. This error is really, really common because English does not have a third-person singular pronoun to refer to a noun with unknown gender. And so a lot of people just throw in the there, not knowing that that's actually plural, and that makes the sentence wrong. This pronoun antecedent errors of any kind are big time on the SAT, ACT, so please mark that down as an SAT, ACT skill. Next up, let's look at ambiguous antecedents. Make sure that your antecedents are clear in your sentences. Some developing writers are careless in their pronoun usage, as in here. Zelda gave her daughter a bike that she rode constantly from that moment on. Once again, this may sound right to some people, but the pronoun she is actually ambiguous. In grammar, when I'm talking about ambiguity, it's the same thing as just the normal term ambiguous. We mean that it's open to or having several possible meanings or interpretations. Okay? The pronoun she is ambiguous. Who is she referring to? Zelda or her daughter? Those of you who immediately assume it's daughter are probably just making an inference, which is fine, except when we are using correct grammar, we have to read a sentence literally. And literally, it could be either Zelda or her daughter. Maybe Zelda's just that kind of awful parent that buys her daughter a bike and then rides it herself. So we need to remove the ambiguity in this sentence. We can either replace the pronoun with its antecedent or rephrase the entire sentence. We could say Zelda gave her daughter a bike that her daughter rode constantly from that moment on. See how I've replaced she with her daughter. Some people, though, find this sort of repetition distasteful because her daughter, kind of back to back there. So we might rephrase this altogether. You'd probably prefer something like this. After receiving a bike from her mother, Zelda's daughter rode constantly from that moment on. Avoiding antecedent ambiguity is all about writing with your reader's understanding in mind, not your own. So keep that in mind as you read. This is another, antecedent ambiguity is another SAT, ACT skill that you want to jot down in your notebooks. Next, make sure that pronouns are consistent. Some developing writers accidentally shift pronoun point of view while they're writing, as in this sentence here. If someone wants to play games, you must follow the rules. Again, if you're relying on your ear, you may not hear that that is in fact wrong. It's grammatically incorrect to begin discussing something in one person, in one point of view, and continue in another. And in this sentence, we've started in the third person, and then we've shifted to the you, the second person. We need to change one or the other so they match point of view. We can either change the third person somebody to the second person, as in this sentence, if you want to play games, you must follow the rules. Or we can make it less conversational and change that second person you to the third person. If someone wants to play games, he or she must follow the rules. Be vigilant in your writing. That's really the only way to spot these sort of point of view pronoun consistency errors. And this is another big SAT, ACT skill, so mark that down in your notebooks. Lastly, watch out for pronoun case errors. Some developing writers will choose pronouns based on what they think sounds more correct without really knowing the rules, as in this sentence. If not for Anne and I, this company would collapse. I is an object of the preposition for, if not for Anne and I. It's the object of the preposition. But I is a subjective personal pronoun. We need an objective pronoun. If not for Anne and me. Me is that objective form of I. So if not for Anne and me, this company would collapse. This, the original sentence, if not for Anne and I, is an example of what's called hypercorrection. Hypercorrection is the incorrect over-application of some perceived rule in grammar. You see, developing writers know that sentences like, me love reading Walden, sounds childish and like a caveman. It should be, I love reading Walden. But using I isn't universally better than using me. It's just that in this sentence, me should be a subjective pronoun instead of an objective pronoun. So the rules must be applied. Spotting case errors can be especially tricky when you're doing so in a list of things. If not for Anne and I, this company would collapse. Maybe you didn't notice that I was the object of the preposition for because it's separated from it by the other part of the list, Anne. So try using what's called the slot test to identify potential problems in compound structures. The slot test is a method of isolating individual elements of a list and testing them in the sentence one at a time for their grammatical soundness. So if I had that sentence, if not for Anne and I, this company would collapse, I'm going to try each element, Anne, I, separately. If not for Anne, this company would collapse, that sounds fine, so I know Anne is okay. If not for I, this company would collapse. No one says for I, we say for me. So now many of you can hear the error because it's isolated from the rest of that prepositional phrase. Always trust the rules, not your ear. Your ear will let you down a lot of times. Pronoun case errors, that's another big SAT, ACT skill. Try that slot test. Mark this down in your book. So to recap, we looked at pronoun antecedent errors, where the pronoun doesn't agree in number or gender with the antecedent. We looked at pronoun reference errors, where the antecedent is ambiguous or unknown. We also looked at pronoun inconsistency errors, where the personal pronoun point of view shifts. And we looked at pronoun case errors, where the wrong case of the pronoun is used, usually a result of hypercorrection. Go ahead and take a look at the exercise I have for you. Remember, these exercises are really helpful for working towards that SAT, ACT test mastery.